Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. I have been involved with the Wilderness Skills Institute since the beginning. It started in the Southeast, and Bill Hodge, now the ED of a local land trust up in, or I said local, a land trust in Montana, was then the ED of the Southern Appalachian Wilderness Stewards. Jimmy Godry was the Forest Service wilderness person in the regional office in Region 8, and Andrew Downs in our ATC Southern region got together and started the Wilderness Skills Institute. So I have been happily involved all along, and glad to be here today. Let me share my screen. So I have been involved with the Appalachian Trail for a number of years. I started my conservation career in the 70s with the National Park Service, primarily in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and then went to work for the Appalachian Trail, then Conference, now Conservancy, in 1983. And most of my work has been helping to manage the Appalachian Trail through Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee as the regional director in that area. That gave me a lot of experience in all facets of trail management and what we now call visitor use management. And then back in February, I was appointed as the new director of visitor use management for ATC, which doesn't necessarily make me a visitor use expert, but does make me a visitor use facilitator, which is a lot of what we do on the Appalachian Trail. So we've been doing visitor use management on the AT since the very beginning. Benton Mackay came up with the idea for the Appalachian Trail, published his article in October of 1921. And the first work to actually build a piece of the AT began in 1922 in Palisades Interstate Park in New York. And so whenever we've done anything to help hikers where to go or to accommodate hikers, that's visitor use management. So we on the AT are old hands at basic visitor use management. But what's changed since 1922? Why are we now doing modern visitor use management? Well, a lot of things have changed. The AT became a national scenic trail. It became a national park. Thousands and thousands of acres of land have been acquired by the U.S. Forest Service and the National Park Service to provide a protective greenway around the trail. Over 250,000 acres have been acquired for the AT, which makes it about the same size as Rocky Mountain National Park. And then over the years, to provide more scenic resources and sustainable alignments, the AT has become easier to hike. And as a consequence of all those things, the AT's popularity has increased significantly over time. And on off-trail hiker services have also increased, so that hiking the Appalachian Trail has become a
Hey, Mark and Timber.
Heck yeah, enjoy it out there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Has been a recreational opportunity that has become more of a reality for more and more people. So it's become much more complicated to manage both the AT and federal land. Other laws have gotten passed, like the NEPA and the National Forest Management Act, which direct the government to and agency partners to look after the land with a public approach, make sure the public is involved in decisions and do systemic interdisciplinary planning. And that, of course, includes management direction for the AT and for wilderness. But over the years, as different types of decisions were made about visitor management, some of those were found to be deficient by the courts, And the Interagency Visitor Use Management Council was created to address those deficiencies, and they created a new 14-step planning process. Two examples of visitor use management plans that got questioned by courts were the NPS's Merced River plan that used VERP, the Visitor Experience and Resource Protection, and the U.S. Forest Service Chattooga River plan using the limits of acceptable change. So for the Appalachian Trail, it's important to us to meet both our mission and our vision. We want to, as you can see from our mission statement, help all AT partners successfully protect, manage, and advocate for the Appalachian Trail. And we want the AT and its surrounding landscape and the AT experience opportunities to be protected forever for all to enjoy. And so as our 100th anniversary of Benton MacKay's idea has come to pass, ATC is becoming philosophical about the next 100 years, and determined to take a longer range view of what's happening, and decided that visitor use management planning was important. And it's important to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy and the Appalachian Trail, because, you know, balancing visitor benefits and access with desired conditions is really complicated and difficult. So this helps us balance that. Another thing we've determined as the ATC has engaged in visitor use management planning is that doing an excellent job of documenting the steps in the IVUMC framework is really important. You know, documenting what was discussed, you know, what was included, what was rejected, all those things, or the framework provides a consistent planning process for use anywhere on the Appalachian Trail. Whereas previously we had different agency planning processes depending upon who the landowner was. So those are both big steps in the right direction. And then, of course, visitor use management planning, as it is now laid out, heavily involves the public, and it must be defensible. And that's, of course, the purpose of the IVUMC framework. On the AT, of the 6 original agencies that participated in forming the IVUMC, we worked with the Park Service, the Forest Service, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so we're interested in making sure that management decisions on lands managed by our partners are done in the way that they have agreed to. The other 3 agencies, I'm sure you all are aware, but are BLM, the Army Corps, and NOAA, who are involved in the Interagency Visitor Use Management Planning Council. Jimmy, oh, there it goes. So here's the 14 steps. Excuse me. And ATC's current focus is on 3 things: visitor use management training, step 5, which is circled in red here, which is defining the desired condition for the Appalachian Trail, and also, excuse me, and also data management and collection. Unfortunately, that doesn't show at the bottom of the screen there. Anyway, and so we are working to put all that to play along the Appalachian Trail. We first started working with the IVUMC framework in 2015, and that actually occurred at the Wilderness Skills Institute in the Southeast region. And we had a session there with a Forest Service representative from the IVUMC, and learned with many of our club volunteers and ATC staff what it was all about, and also had a very top level intern recruited who was going to facilitate the process for us along the Appalachian Trail in Georgia. The next year, as it became obvious that the IVUMC framework was the way to go, our Trail and Camping Committee of our Stewardship Council formulated a policy about visitor use management specifically for the Appalachian Trail. In 2016, ATC's Board of Directors adopted that for use by ATC and hopefully all of our partners along the Appalachian Trail. The Trail and Camping Committee continues to work on visitor use management. We are attempting to distill the IVUMC planning so that it is more simple and will help expedite local AT VUM projects, because some aspects of it can be sort of a cookie cutter from one place to another along the AT, and other aspects are a little bit complicated and need some simplification to make it usable by people who are only going to be working on one project. Additionally, ATC staff can assist AT clubs and agency partners, and we're about to actively engage in training all of our regional managers in visitor use management planning processes. There are 31 AT clubs along the Appalachian Trail, each of which has a specific piece of the AT that they look after. They range in length from 2.5 miles by the Randolph Mountain Club in New Hampshire to over 200 miles by the main Appalachian Trail Club. And the diverse bunch, they are not chapters of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. They are instead standalone organizations. And so it's very important to us to help them understand what we're doing, but do it in such a way that they will be persuaded that that the problem is what the issue is and not ATC guidance. At any rate, we've already been doing some visitor use management along the AT. These red arrows indicate those. Going from south to north, they're all of the AT in Georgia, on the Chattahoochee National Forest, the area called Max Patch, which is on the Pisgah, and a little bit of the Key National Forest, the so-called Triple Crown area that is in Virginia near Roanoke. It includes both U.S. Forest Service and National Park Service managed lands. In Maryland, Annapolis Rocks, which is was not visitor use management, but the precursor to it, a recreation ecology project. And then finally, the Franconia Ridge area of the AT and the White Mountains and White Mountain National Forest of New Hampshire. So here's what the issues were in those places. Every year we have thousands of people attempting to hike the whole AT, starting at Amicalola Falls State Park and Springer Mountain, which is the southern terminus of the AT. Additionally, about half of the AT in Georgia is in federally designated wilderness, so it's important to try and get visitor use management right. At Max Patch, a 120-acre mountaintop meadow next to a road, with lots of day use, but also car camping going on. The McAfee Knob, Dragon's Tooth, Tinker Cliffs, Triple Crown area of Virginia has one of the most photographed views on the whole Appalachian Trail, and unfortunately is also near a major highway, so it gets lots of day use. Annapolis Rocks is both a site along the Appalachian Trail and a popular rock climbing area, and it also is pretty close to a road there too. I think it's about 2 miles from the road. And finally, Franconia Ridge is heavily used primarily by day use. People make a loop up off of from the bottom of the valley up along the AT for a few miles and then back down again. Unfortunately, they were parking along the edges of Interstate 93, and that was a significant safety issue as well as being illegal. And then along the AT, which is an alpine area, there were a number of rare species adjacent to the AT, as well as the Pemigewasset wilderness, which is only 66 feet off the AT along that stretch. And then a number of other hotspots are being considered. Roan Mountain area along the Tennessee-North Carolina border is under consideration for visitor use management planning. as is the Mount Rogers National Recreation stretch of the Appalachian Trail in Southwest Virginia. There's concerns about various places in Pennsylvania, and on and on. Lots of places where the AT gets lots of use. So here's a reason we started the AT VUM planning in Georgia. Over here on the left, we see a spike in use that occurred for northbound through hikers, culminating in 1999 and so on. That spike was due to the publication of the book A Walk in the Woods. And as you can see, use increased significantly, fairly rapidly. Then in 2007, we were approached by producers working with Robert Redford, who had purchased the movie rights to the book and proposed to make a movie. And we were quite concerned that that would result in another spike in use, particularly of northbound through hikers. So we began working on visitor use in 2007 with the Chattahoochee National Forest, Georgia AT Club, and ATC, but we also considered it at a regional level and through our regional partnership committee meetings, which included all of the AT clubs from Georgia to the Shenandoah National Park and all of our agency partners along that stretch. We began to consider visitor use management and how to deal with it. The original proposal to make the movie failed. One of the proposed co-stars was too sick to participate, and so not much happened. But then in 2014, new producers got involved, and it took off in earnest. And so again, you can see our concern was warranted, and both the movie A Walk in the Woods and preceding its coming out was the movie Wild, about a through hiker on the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail. I think that since it was a much better movie, it actually probably generated more use than A Walk in the Woods did. But at any rate, the combined of that and just the iconic status of the Appalachian Trail brought even new heights of use by northbound through hikers. One evidence of that use was the Hawk Mountain shelter site about 8 miles north of Springer Mountain, the southern terminus of the AT, where at the time of the visitor use management planning began, had about 4 acres of impact, primarily from that bubble, as we call it, of through hikers that were starting moving north. Of course, our desired condition was to have it return to a natural appearing environment and spread use over space and time. So that's what our visitor use management focused on. We did have a lot of success with that. We called it Georgia PATH, PATH being an acronym for Protecting the AT Hiking Experience. That produced a document about 90 pages long that was carefully detailed, comprehensive look at the visitor use planning we did there, and provides a template for visitor use managing elsewhere on the AT, particularly on national forest lands. Since that, we have added 5 additional ridge runners who are like backcountry rangers and have improved training with local partners through the ridge runner training. Our local AT club, the Georgia Appalachian Trail Club, started a trail ambassador program, which is a volunteer ridge runner program. So now during the through hiker bubble season, which runs from roughly the last week in February through mid-April, there's somebody on the trail, in many cases, multiple people on the trail, providing leave no trace information and hiker assistance and doing minor maintenance, so on, through the Ridge Runner and the Trail Ambassador programs. We also started a online camping registration system, which is called AT Camp. Its purpose was to provide a visual reference that through hikers could use to see how many other people had signed up for a particular day to start their through hike in hopes that they would spread out. It has worked to some extent. However, as use increased, even though the bell curve has widened, it hasn't gone down much because days stay full throughout the season pretty much this year. We've also had through hiker specific hang tags, which are a very simple thing that we began to serve as an inducement to attract people to go to Amicalola Falls State Park to receive a 15-minute through hiking orientation called Start. That's been quite successful, and probably 80% of northbound through hikers have been taking that Start Smart program. Done a number of, well, we've inventoried all of the campsites in Georgia 2 or perhaps 3 times now. Have produced food storage videos. We are improving our data collection. All of our Ridge Runner reports and other reports used to be paper. Now we're using apps and trail counters. And we've been working to redesign our camping system along the AT. At Hawk Mountain in particular, we designed a new campsite about 3/4 of a mile south of the shelter with 30 side hill campsites. Produced Don't Be That Guy, Leave No Trace videos. I would encourage you all to go to ATC's website and look on the Leave No Trace page. Those are there. They're very short. They're generally 2 to 2.5 minutes long. There are 2 videos per 7 points of Leave No Trace, and they were designed to be amusing, to engage people and keep their attention, and I think they do a great job of that. We also have an online AT specific Leave No Trace certification, and has started AT how to hike the AT trainings, both in seminars and on trail work. And I'm sorry, maybe you can see the last bullet, but that says originally the Georgia path called for a requirement for bear canister use from Georgia to the Damascus, Virginia. That hasn't happened yet, but we did start as an outgrowth of that a trail-wide, a uniform food storage working group with all of our federal agency partners in both Forest Service and the Park Service, and that's made great strides. And we think that all will be recommending the use of bear canisters shortly, and it looks like at least 2 of the forests in the southern region, at least, will have new food storage orders as a result of this effort. This is Max Patch. You can see here that this aerial view is a little unnerving. This is out pretty much in the middle of nowhere, but has become quite popular through social media. Someone counted the number of tents visible. It's about 125 tents visible on this particular picture. Problem here, main problem is that so many people are visiting that they're blocking the narrow gravel state road that's adjacent to it so that emergency vehicles can't get through, but also large parties, human waste, litter, new social trails, all those trails you can see crisscrossing are all user-created trails that are new. But we've had some success there as well. A lot of new signs, a lot of work to direct people with fences and so on. The Carolina Mountain Club, the local AT club, also started a trail ambassador program. And the district rangers on the adjoining districts, the Appalachian District on the Pisgah National Forest and the Unaka District of the Cherokee National Forest, have been working with us closely, and there is a closure order for summit camping that's working its way through, I believe it's finished regional office review and is now being reviewed by OGC in the Atlanta office. And we've gotten lots of help in a variety of ways from people who are concerned to see Max Patch being used and abused in that way. Triple Crown in Virginia, that view of McAfee's Knob there is on the AT license plate for Virginia. And like I said, it's one of the most viewed, or excuse me, one of the most heavily pictured views along the whole AT. Have lots of use there from day users, plenty of people backpacking there as well. And then again, Route 311, which is goes down to Roanoke, just about 10 miles away, is very heavily used, and it's the parking lot is at the crest of the hill, which is dangerous, and you know, overflow parking and so on. So big problems there with a variety of things. A McAfee Knob task force was created, which involves local AT club, involves the state of Virginia, it involves the U.S. Forest Service, it involves the National Park Service, it involves the county, it involves the local Greenway Committee. So it's really taking hold. The NPS has done a parking design concept plan to improve things at that parking area. The Virginia DOT has funded a pedestrian overpass that'll be built in about 2 years to get people safely across Route 311. And then the National Park Service Denver Service Center VUM experts have initiated a formal VUM planning process funded by the Appalachian National Scenic Trail that just commenced about a month ago. Now, this is the Annapolis Rocks project up in Maryland. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because Dr. Jeff Marion is going to be presenting on this tomorrow. But essentially, it was a 43,000 square feet of disturbance area, and ATC and the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club asked Dr. Marion to come look at it and see what he suggested. And what he suggested was getting rid of those large flat campsites that had no restraints on visitor expansion. And instead, these number of sites were built in the side hills so that they resist user-created expansion. And that resulted in a 92% reduction in the aggregate area of disturbance. Pretty impressive. This is Franconia Ridge. This is the AT there on the Alpine area. Labor Day weekend 2017, you can see a constant line of people hiking along the AT and the number of people on the summit. I believe this is a little haystack along that section. Here are people. You can see the trail on the right, which is rocked in. It's got scree walls on both sides to try and keep the people on the trail, but people get off. Here's people walking their dogs and letting them poop on the rare plants, and the Pymmy Wilderness is just beyond that dog to the left. And here's the summit. Certainly not the kind of situation we would like to see in a area along the AT that's supposed to have a primitive experience. So lots of successes there as well. Introduction of a shuttle service. The Alpine Stewards program has been expanded and will have daily coverage, and lots of collaboration between partners throughout that neck of the woods in New Hampshire. And then, as I said, we're going to have hotspots that we're looking at elsewhere. One of the most important determinants of what is a hotspot, what is a hotspot is an area of mutual agreement that is decided on by our partners along with ATC. So how do we deal with a hotspot? Well, the first step, getting together the background material that includes the tradition and philosophies of the AT, policies from local club management plans and ATC, regulations from the AT comprehensive plan, code of federal regulations, forest and park management plans, and of course, laws like the National Trail System Act and the Wilderness Act. Desired condition is fundamental for determining visitor use management actions, and that's why we are focused on it. So we have some broad overarching visitor, desired condition statements. The original one came from the Appalachian Trail Management Principles. It was considered the definition of what the AT was. That evolved into the AT Comprehensive Plan statement about it. And then more recently in 2015, the Park Service Foundation document was created. The definition and AT Comprehensive Plan work was modified somewhat to provide a nature and purpose statement. A broad overview, and then a corollary to that, each of the 8 national forests that the AT traverses have the AT as a management area, and in each one of those there is a desired condition statement, which again is a kind of an overarching high-level view of what that should be. But we wanted to be more specific. Our Trail and Camping Committee created 5 desired condition descriptions that can serve as a guide for use along the AT. They're very similar to ROS. They go from designated wilderness to moderately natural with frequent evidence of human development. And those, again, are to be used locally by AT managers to help optimize visitor use management planning. And again, AT visitor use management planning will always be done in partnership with all of our AT partners and the public. Here is the first page of the desired conditions. You can see we have them for natural resources, social conditions, managerial conditions, and then the non-conforming areas. For instance, in the Blood Mountain Wilderness area, the AT itself is a non-conforming area. That section of the AT from Neal's Gap up to the summit of Blood Mountain has continually been one of the most heavily used trails in all of Region 8 of the National Forest System. Visitor use management on the AT is adaptive. We think that's very important. We've been using it, our most developed visitor use management planning processes in Georgia, and there we have been putting adaptive management to work. But what's necessary for that is high quality information so you can tell if things are getting better or worse. We are continually trying to get better quality data and of course record that data over a longer and longer period of time, again, so managers can see what's going on. And then try to see what the response of users is to what we have done, seeing if, for instance, if we build a new campsite, if people are using it, and if that's diminishing impacts at the original site, things like that. So, as I said, as more information and experience were gathered in Georgia, we have adapted. And so originally there were 3 zones. There was a front country, a back country, and a primitive zone that were used to map the AT desired condition along the AT in Georgia. But that wasn't nuanced enough, so it has been more recently changed to 5 zones, not unlike the zones that were developed by the Trail and Camping Committee, going from designated wilderness to places like road crossings and high use areas. Here is that indicator list and matrix. Again, social, biophysical, managerial. And here are the maps that go with it. On the left is the original one from 2015. On the right is 2019. I hope you all can see my cursor here, but what is most obvious and changed is that the 5 wilderness areas along the AT are now shown specifically. Here's the Blood Mountain, here's Ravens Cliff, this is Tray Mountain, excuse me, Mark Trail Wilderness, Tray Mountain, and the Southern Monongahela Wilderness in green. And then the primitive areas are shown in blue. And then this area, which previously was in the backcountry zone, is now in that area 2, which is, or excuse me, area 4, which is sort of a cross between front country and backcountry. So more nuance helping us to do a better job of managing the significant number of visitors along the AT in Georgia. So as I said before, ATC is starting to take a long view. Our strategic plan specifically has one of 6 sections focused on visitor use management. That's why I was hired as the Director of Visitor Use Management to try and increase the success of visitor use management planning along the trail. We'll be focusing on training, as I said, and then working to improve our data. That's really important. We discovered that right off the bat when we did our visitor use management planning in Georgia. We realized that our data was very deficient, and so have been working steadily to improve that since then. And we're going to hire a visitor use management specific data manager later this year to try and really up our ante to the best we can do. And so that's it. Happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Hey, thanks, Morgan. I'm gonna try and approach the Q&A a little bit different here. I'll take everybody off of like unmute. You can unmute yourselves and just offer up that if you want to type a question in the chat, you're welcome to. Or if you want to go ahead and ask a question, it'd be great to have some interaction, I think, from my end at least. Raise your hand and I'll ask you to unmute yourself and ask a question. So anyone have any questions for Morgan right now? So I have one in the chat box here. It says, have you found that the trail maintaining clubs are eager to participate in ATC VUM planning?
Yes, yeah, one of my first priorities was to reach out to all of our agency partners and to all of the AT clubs. I've had nothing but positive responses from all. I haven't really reached out to the states yet, but all of our federal partners and all 31 AT clubs, no negative responses as yet. And I've had several follow-up calls with about 5 of the clubs so far that are interested in learning more.
Great. Hey, Christy Ildwine, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi there. My question is, how do we work with the Forest Service having low funding and personnel to be out there and to do these things, and some public resistance to having their experience be more restricted to help with visitor use management?
I'm not sure I can answer that, but I will tell you what I know. In Georgia, it was not an issue. The Chattahoochee National Forest was an eager participant, and the forest supervisor participated in many of the meetings. We've had the same level of participation for the Max Patch on the Pisgah National Forest. The 2 district rangers have been fully engaged along with their staff throughout. And we just had a change in the district rangers on the Pisgah district, and the new district ranger has actually asked for assistance from the Forest Service reps on the Interagency Visitor Use Management Council, and they are participating at no cost, is my understanding. It has something to do with the new Forest Service budgeting process, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to let that cat out of the bag or not, but at any rate, that seems to be the case. And in some cases, a lot of the outputs, for instance, in Georgia were funded not by the Forest Service, although they certainly participate, but by either the Georgia AT Club or the ATC. In the 3 southern states that I worked in for many years, we are blessed to have AT specialty license plates, and they generate close to $300,000 a year in revenue, which we use in each of the states. And many of the projects in Georgia were funded through the Georgia Appalachian Trail license plate, although the work we did to mitigate the issues at the Hawk Mountain Shelter was funded by 3 private donors.
Great. Okay, I got another question from the chat box I'll share. It's from Becky Blanchard. And she says, I'm curious if you run into any tensions between local use, meaning day and short overnight trips, and long distance hiker use in your VUM efforts. How do you approach this, both in your management of the AT and also in data collection?
Well, like I said, in terms of the data collection, I think it's deficient right now. We have Ridge Runner reports and some trail counters, but it's really not doing the job. We can tell how many people have started the trail or who have participated in the sign up on AT Camp. And then there's also a registration at Amical Falls State Park. So we have 2 pieces of data that are not necessarily directly correlated with the amount of people who are actually starting. So that's what we need to figure out. In terms of tension between local day and short overnight trips, there hasn't been much. And in fact, during the thru hiker bubble, there's a pretty significant number of people who come specifically to mingle with the northbound thru hikers. I talked to a group of Boy Scouts, the Boy Scout leader once who was camping at Hawk Mountain Shelter. And I said, you know, you could come a different time and there wouldn't be all these people here crowding this campsite. And he said, well, we came last year, and while we were here, there were people from, I can't remember how many he said, but 7 or 8 different nations that the Boy Scouts got to talk to. And we're from Mississippi, where diversity is not very significant. And so we came back again this year with the same thing in mind. We were hoping to run into all these people from all over the place. And so I think that there is tension in terms of when the crowding gets tight, but it's that's just based on crowding, not so much on whether they're section hikers or long distance hikers.
Okay, Jack Haskell, I see you have your hand up if you want to ask your question.
Hi, Morgan. You just spoke to this a little bit, but it's another question about data collection. And I hear that your data is imperfect and lacking a little bit. So I want to know your thoughts on how to improve data collection, specifically about visitor use levels and travel patterns.
Well, we are investigating that. I mean, it's at the beginning stages of trying to do better. Like I say, I think we'll continue to use trail counters in appropriate situations, but for instance, at Franconia Ridge, they're pretty enthusiastic about using the data from that. But we would like to have more real-time data that is not available from Ridge Runner reports and things like that. So we've been working with Guthook, for instance, to see if there's any way that we might be able to get anonymous data from him about where people are staying per night. We're hoping to investigate other crowdsourced data of various types. But generally speaking, well, the other thing we're going to try and do is create virtual trail registers. That I think potentially bears the most fruit because we could capture information about not only backpackers, but about day hikers as well, assuming we can entice people to use it. So that's my hope, is that we will eventually come up with some sort of virtual system that will allow our data to go to a centralized database that will have analytics built in, that will provide dashboards for all of our managers to have easy and quick access to visitor use data along the trail.
Great to have a comment. Actually, it's a question, I suppose. It's specific, so I don't totally know the context. But speaking of funding, this is from Sam. Who's funding the pedestrian bridge over 311 in Virginia?
I'm not absolutely positive, but I'm almost sure that it's the Virginia DOT. I think they got some sort of a grant to do it. It may have been RTP, I'm not sure, but at any rate, it is the D is in charge of that.
Okay, I have a question from Linda Morigliano, who I just want to close the loop in that, boy, Linda was the person who presented our previous session here, and she was the one who came to North Carolina back in 2015 and put on this visitor use management session at the Wilderness Skills Institute there. So with that, she said, can you speak more about the shuttle system on Franconia, I got that wrong, Ridge, which organizations were involved in setting up the shuttle and what have been the outcomes so far? Is parking congestion reduced?
So I can send you the report on it. All of those partners I mentioned very briefly from New Hampshire were involved. It's been a pretty comprehensive visitor use management planning process, particularly as they got started. So the New Hampshire DOT has been involved, local tourism, the U.S. Forest Service. That's not all the partners, but those are the main ones. And the shuttle system pilot was done in 2019. 2020, there was none because of COVID. 2021, there is currently not one because of COVID. But yes, there were reductions. They set up satellite parking areas that they were running the shuttles back and forth from. They tested several different kinds of shuttles, different shuttle routes, different kinds of shuttle buses, that kind of thing. And so there are some real outputs from it. I can send that along to you.
Great. Comment from Becky Blanchard again, and it says it would be great to be able to get anonymized data from Guthook. Thanks for challenging my pronunciation of anonymized. What a treasure trove. I don't know Guthook.
Guthook is the trail name for a guy who started apps that are essentially trail guides for various trails. He's got one for many of them now. He's in collaboration with Atlas Guides at this point, but there's one for the AT, one for the PCT. I think there's one for the CDT, but a lot of much shorter trails as well. And they're used quite a lot, very popular. And, so they have people that purchase those. And so they have data about where they are and all that kind of stuff. But our discussion with them hasn't gotten very far, so I don't know if it's going to be feasible or not. But Guthook is a leave no trace master educator, so he understands why we're concerned and is interested in trying to help if he can.
Great. Hey, I'm going to drop a link in the chat from a group called Headwaters Economics, and they're doing research right now on how to use a variety of different platforms to collect visitor use data, and they're trying to find places where they can ground truth, meaning where you have trail counters out, and they can just take a look at the data available to them to see how close they are in estimating use. And so before we're done, I'll put that link in here. We probably have time for one more question, and we need to wrap things up. So from Jack Haskell, in your opinion, what would be a sustainable number of no-bow through hikers a year? Great, last one.
Pretty close to what you've suggested on the PCT, Jack. If we had 50 a day starting, I think that would work. Ours is based upon the campsite or overnight site capacity for 3 one-day increments north of Springer Mountain. Most people seem to go as they start their hike about 8 miles a day. So counting the number of campsite spaces available that have been delineated already, that's about 50 per increment per each one of those sections. And so that would be a good number.
Great. Well, hey, thank you again, Morgan. I know we have more time with you this week, but appreciate you sharing this with us, and appreciate the group participation.